Hi, I'm Randy Lavasser, and I'm one of your candidates for City Commission here in Royal Oak. A lot of people have been asking me recently about the lawsuit by a group of taxpayers against the city trying to stop the city center project. So I thought I'd do this quick video to give a little bit of information, hopefully answer some questions and provide you the information you need in order to make some decisions and to know what's going on in our great city. As many of you are aware, the city back in August voted to give the parking lot between City Hall and Mr. B's to a private developer for building a new office building. In addition to that, the commission decided to give $5.5 million of taxpayer funds to that private developer for that project. And that agreement with that developer, that triggered a number of other things that involve a lot of public debt, borrowing approximately $56 million to build new government facilities downtown. And there's a number of taxpayers who are concerned about this, and they brought suit against the city to stop the project. They have a number of arguments that they make in their lawsuit. The most interesting that I find has to do with the amount of debt that's involved that the city would be borrowing to fund this project. We have a city charter that basically is the agreement that the voters have with the city, that the voters approve to define what the rules are for the city government to proceed and represent us. And that charter provides that the city can borrow no more than 5% of assessed value without getting additional voter approval for more debt. And there's absolutely no question the city has exceeded that 5% borrowing limit. And that's a major argument that the taxpayers are making in court, is that the city cannot borrow more because of that charter limit. The city has some very interesting responses to that. Probably the primary one that they make is that the taxpayers involved don't have the legal right to sue the city. The reasons is they believe that for a taxpayer to sue the city, the taxpayer would have to suffer some very unique special injury or harm that differs from the rest of taxpayers in order to have standing to sue the city. And they say that these taxpayers, they don't have that special harm. It's a very interesting argument. A secondary argument that the city is making is that state law, even though that voters have set a 5% limit for city borrowing in our charter, that state law would allow that to be up to 10%. And it's a very interesting argument because it's so unusual for a city to be making it. In most instances, when cities are battling with the state over whether or not city law or state law should govern, most cities will argue that the local people, the commission, the voters, whatever the case may be, that their preferences for the law should prevail. But in this instance, the city attorney that we pay for with our city tax dollars is making just the opposite argument. He is arguing that that state law should trump the 5% limit that voters put into the city charter, and that the city commission accordingly should not be limited to that 5% limit in the charter and should not have to go to voters to ask for more. Again, that's a very unusual argument for a city to make in any type of litigation. The city is putting most of its effort, though, behind the standing issue, the question of whether the taxpayers have the legal authority to sue the city. I find that to be a very interesting but concerning argument. If the city were to prevail on that argument, then the question would come up as to when would the city ever be held accountable by the taxpayers for violating its charter? Under what circumstances would taxpayers ever have special damages or unique damages, unique harm that they're suffering that differs from the general tax-paying population that would give them the authority to hold the city government accountable if they violate the charter? And I suspect that we could have a situation where city government would never be held accountable if the city is to prevail on that argument. That is where the city is making most of its argument, though. I really believe that it would be very unusual for the judge to say that voters can't set a lower borrowing limit than what state law would otherwise allow. We know that the city can't set a higher limit but it would be very unusual for a judge to say that voters can't set a lower limit. That court action is scheduled for a hearing with the judge on Wednesday of this week. There's a very good possibility that the judge will decide these issues on that day and announce it to the public. The judge could agree with the city and say that these taxpayers don't have the legal authority to sue and toss the lawsuit out. The judge also could say, yes, they do have the authority and the city has exceeded its borrowing limit, can't proceed with this project without getting voter approval. There's always that possibility as well. But I look forward to getting that information out to you when it's available, and I do hope it's available for us this coming Wednesday. With any questions or any comments you want to leave me, feel free to respond on my Facebook page. Look forward to hearing from you. Again, I'm Randy Lavasser, one of your candidates for City Commission on the November 7th ballot.